Today will be a first impression of the 622B from Campus CP622B. Before I start, I thank Jaben for loaning me this copy of the IEM. They were very nice. They loaned to me and I get to keep it for a week to try it out. Now you can see that this IEM here is on my hand. It looks pretty nice. I'm not sure whether is this the default one. I'm guessing that this is the default faceplate. And overall, it is probably a mid to large size IEM in terms of sizing itself. If you compare to something like, say, you can see here the 64 audio. The 64 audio is smaller and slimmer. So this is actually more on the mid-size to mid to small size type of shell, and this is slightly bigger than that. And then you can see that this is the nozzle itself. The nozzle has a mesh and then it has a lip, so you can easily fit tips on it, no problems here. Now this is a 2-pin design, and it's a flush 2-pin design, so you can use almost any cables with it. Now the cable that is attached here, at least from what I see, is an Elitech cable. So I guess that this is, if it's the default one, it's a pretty good and decent cable itself, as you can see here. So with that all said, I will do a first impression, listen to a few tracks, give you my honest impression, followed by some measurements before we, end off this particular video itself. So overall, I find that they are pretty balanced of a sound. Now I have heard about 3 tracks. I know Akuruhi, Ibarra, and also Heartbeat. So this is to me a relatively balanced sound. There is good amount of bass, mids, and highs, and none of them really overpowering each other. I do find that the mids are not too recessed in a lot of, like, say, Harman-like tuning. They do push the mids back a bit. This one doesn't push it too behind. Bass-wise, it's not like super elevated in any way. In fact, I think there is a hum in the mid-bass region. At least that's what I have for impression-wise. There is a very good impact, but the sub-bass itself, the filling and rumble of the bass is not really that much. So my guess is that the mid bass is a little bit more of the elevated side, while the sub bass is probably not too much. Then when it comes to the higher regions, the treble and the higher mids, there is some semblance. So it means that at least in the higher mids and entering the lower treble, there is probably some peak there. I didn't notice on that. And overall, the vocals have quite a good amount of air. So my guess is that with the good amount of air and the cymbals pretty, I would say the cymbals don't, of course, sound the most sparkling itself, but they are noticeable. I would guess that the treble there's good amount of treble, but not like exaggerated amount and super elevated in any way. So there is some good amount of treble, but definitely not super elevated. So overall, I think that this is probably a pretty balanced sound signature, at least based on my first impression. I feel that it is pretty balanced itself. Now this is of course listening in isolation. Now I will compare it with the U12T. This is because it's the easiest to find comparison, and I do a lot of videos with this comparison, so it's a good baseline. So without wasting time, let's do the comparison. So I did a very quick comparison between both of these IEM, and firstly I would say that the Campur definitely have a bigger soundstage, like noticeably bigger soundstage. So this belongs to the mid-large soundstage. I always feel that the U12T is like the mid soundstage. I mean, you depend who you compare to, right? If you compare it to the lower end, of course U12T is big, but if you compare it at the $1,000+ region, I think this is like mid-size. While the Campur is bigger than the U12T, so it's the mid-large soundstage. I think it probably isn't as big as the Maestro SE based on my impression. Now the next thing is that when it comes to the overall balance of the sound, I would say as the Campur feels a bit more balanced. There is more body to the sound. There is punch in the mid bass, but the overall rumble, I do find that the U12T has more rumble, but it doesn't have the punch. U12T bass is a bit more plop plop type. That's how I feel. While this side is really the whack and then it's very clean. So that is the difference of the bass itself, the impact, the I would say as how distinct the impact is significantly higher on the 622B. Now, when it comes to the treble, let's talk about the mids first. When it comes to the mids, my impression is that the 622B has a more elevated lower mid, so it has more body and a slightly warmer sound to me. While when it comes to the higher mids, I find that it's not as elevated as the U12T. U12T have a relatively elevated higher mids, so it feels very clear there. You know, there's this part on presence and clarity. Yes, the U12T is really clear there, while the 622B just doesn't feel as clear and as present there compared to the U12T. But when it comes to the higher mids, I think they are about the same. The amount of sibilance on both IEMs are relatively similar. So, you know, no difference here. I think in the treble region, I do feel the 622B is slightly clearer, but both of them doesn't feel very energetic there, not very elevated there in any way. So, you know, my take is that at least when it comes to the actual treble region, they feel about the same. You know, that's my impression between the U12T and the 622B. As such, I just want to give a sound summary before I do a measurement, you know, so that it doesn't taint the review itself. The 622B, at least in my eyes, is more of a balanced, full-body mid sound with a emphasis on the bass impact, which is mid bass, and a relatively not so elevated mids, especially in the higher mid side. So it doesn't have that ultra clean and clear voice, a bit more of the full body, smoother voice, which is really nice, especially if you consider listening to vocals, especially female or male vocals. I think that is the smoothness and the general tonality that I prefer over the elevated mids, which give you clarity, but you know, feels very sterile at times, right? Next, I would say as at the treble, nothing too spectacular. So if you're a treble head, this will probably not excite you. And then I don't have any issues. I mean, the fit was great. The isolation was good. Overall, I do think that at least from my first impression without any measurements, pretty nice IEM. I would say is it worth its value? If you prefer this kind of sound, especially the mid bass and a bigger sound stage, and overall, I'll say it's more engaging sound, I do think that this is slightly better than the U12T. So considering the price of U12T, this is ahead and diminishing returns and stuff, this is probably worth it. Now, pricing wise, well, this is what is written on the demo set, 4899. So it is not a very cheap. This is Sing dollars, by the way. So this is a pretty pricey IEM. I just want to touch on two things before I end this video here. First is measurements, which will be done in a moment. And next, I will talk about gaming. So gaming was an interesting experience with this. I mean, when I tried it, for a very short period of time, I was not concentrating on the sound at that point in time. I just want to try the game part of things. The bass is really nice. It's very punchy. When you walk around, the gunshots, really fantastic sound there. And then when it comes to the details, I would say it's really good. You can hear little footsteps and stuff. Now, the game I'm playing was First Descendant, pretty new game. And it was a FPS, a fast action game. You can really hear the little sound and the direction where they're coming. I do feel right that the sound stage is more of the flat in front of you rather than some curve. So, it doesn't give you, I would say, as a very precise soundstage, but it gives you a good general direction and it's flat in front. It doesn't give you behind. At least I don't feel like it gives me behind at all. You can probably pick up the cues and train yourself to listen to the various sound signature on this IEM, but definitely it is very well separated, very good details, very clear in terms of rendition of things that matter to you when you play games. And lastly, it is very, very fun to listen to this IEM while playing games because it's so dynamic and exciting. Okay, I will do some measurements and I'll come back and talk about it in a moment. I'm back from measurements, and this is a compliant coupler that I pair up, to just measure my IEMs. You can see that I also changed the tips because the square tips fit nicely inside there, and also it's more consistent across every single IEM I try. So now, let's take a look at the frequency response. Now, this frequency response, I will say that, my impression while wearing it is slightly different, right? Firstly, I did feel like there is more mid-bass presence, but this one doesn't look like it. There is a slope from the bass to all the way to, the vocals themselves. It's a very gradual slope. Even though, yes, the bass is quite high, but it's not ridiculously high. And it just looks like it's a slope down all the way to 300 hertz, and then it slowly retains and climbs up all the way to 2.5K. The only thing that matches my impression is that the sound doesn't have this very clean and bright sound that I get in the U12T, because U12T has a peak at about 1 to 2K, while this one doesn't even peak all the way to about 3K, close to 3K. I think it's about 2.5, 2.6K before it peaks, and then it goes down away. So that is an interesting observation. It doesn't have that very outright clear vocals, and it's a slow climb up. There is more mids inside this IEM. As such, I feel that the mids are more filled up. But that's the only thing that actually matches my impression, interestingly, because I did say that there is some sibilance, but if you see where it dips down, it actually dips down crazily at the 5, 6K, 7K hertz region, which is usually where sibilance happen. I did notice that there's a spike, but that 8K is probably a resonance, so I don't really think, not too sure on the exact value. I do know that the U12T at that value is lower, but both of them do sound like they have sibilance itself. So most likely the tips do actually matter quite a bit, and how deep you insert, how it fits on your ear actually matters a lot. So this is really one thing about measurements with IEMs. You can measure them quite easily, with devices like this, but the measurement and the actual experience may differ a lot because of your tips, how you insert, how deep you insert, how you wear it, and many other factors, because this is coupled direct to your ear, and your ear is probably very different from the guy next to you. Unlike headphones, which is outside of the head, there's of course head-related transfer, but I find that IEMs are a lot more finicky when it comes to wear, and as such, it results in a difference of impressions. So that is something about IEM. But I hope that the measurements are actually useful to you guys. Overall, I don't change my impression. This is a punchy IEM, full-bodied mids. There's a little bit of sibilance, but it's quite minor there. The treble isn't anything exciting or to write home about. So I do feel like overall it is more of a balanced style IEM compared to even, let's say, the U12T when I listen to it. And that's really about it. This is my first look at the Campus CP622B, and I hope to see you guys again in my next first look. Bye bye.